Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here, welcome back to the railway and welcome to another review. Up today it's a brand new diesel locomotive from Heljan. Last year I did a review on the Dapol Great Western Railcar, and essentially I found that it wasn't all that well detailed, particularly given how much it cost. And now, just this month, Heljan have released their brand new for 2021, all freshly tooled, Great Western Railcar, and I've got one here as you can see, and it is in the British Railways blood and custard livery. I thought I would go for this one because all of the other railcars I've got are in the Great Western colours, so it might be nice to try a slightly different one. As you can see, this has the later Swindon angular sort of bodywork as opposed to the banana bodywork, or the streamlined, alright, I'll use the proper word, bodywork that the Dapol railcar had, but the two prototypes are kind of similar, it's all the same sort of thing, so it will be very interesting to see how Heljan's new model compares with Dapol's slightly older model. Now this Heljan model is much more expensive than the Dapol one. This has an RRP of £189.99 and I paid £160.65 from Hatton's. Affiliate links in the description if you want to check them out, and I think that's about £35 more expensive than the Dapol one. So as high as my expectations were for the Dapol railcar, expectations for this one are quite a lot higher. But I'm fascinated to see how this is. Heljan's slightly older models from a couple of years ago don't tend to do very well in my reviews, so it will be fascinating to see how a brand new one fares. So let's find out, let's see if it's any good. Let's check out the new Heljan Great Western AEC Railcar. And I really do like these things, actually. They're a fascinating glance back in time, aren't they, as to what the railways used to look like. Very unlikely to ever see anything like this on our railways again, at least with this sort of visual style. And, you know, the fact that Heljan have brought out a brand new model gives me an excuse to get another one, particularly in a different livery. If Heljan hadn't done that, I might never have tried a blood and custard one, so that's pretty cool. And Heljan, I believe, will be the fourth manufacturer to produce one of these in 00 gauge. You had the Lima one from many years ago, then you've got the Hornby version, which was an updated version of the Lima, then of course Dapol, and now of course Heljan. So quite a lot of competition for Heljan here in 00 gauge, although Heljan are producing an O gauge version of this, and I guess there will be quite a lot less competition there because I don't think anybody else has done. Anyway, enough about that. Let me show you the end of the box. I do quite like this design. There's a lot of information on this sticker. The one I have is 19403. It is in the BR Crimson and Cream. That's the more official name for the livery. Diesel railcar, and it's W20W, and it has the white cab roofs. I just thought that would make it more interesting. And the fascinating part is at the bottom, so it's got loads of info, working lights, sprung buffers. That's good to see. I don't think the Dapol one did. It's DCC ready with a 21-pin socket. It has NEM couplers, and it says, this confused me to start with. I thought that said era 4 out of 5, which makes no sense, of course, but I think that means 4/5, you know, 4 and 5. Anyway, not a great deal to see on the rest of the box, so I guess we'll get this out, see what it's like. Yeah, this is going to be a really fun video, I think. I want to know which is the heaviest, which has got the better mechanism, which has got the best detail. Yeah, I think this is going to be a lot of fun. And here is my first sort of look at this thing. You can see it doesn't have the streamlined ends, which is typical of the later design. And it looks pretty good, actually. Can't really get a sense of the finish at the moment while it's still in the packaging. So, yeah, let's proceed. See if I can't pull this thing out. Oh, it's very tight in this packaging. Just give me 5 minutes, hang on. Oh, blimey, this is ridiculous. Why is it so tight? I literally cannot get it out. They've made a sandproof model. Seriously, it's too tight, Heljan. That's it, review over, can't get the damn thing out. No, I'm almost there now. Oh dear. That was silly. Right, okay, we're there. Well, I must say it's well packaged. It's damn near impossible to get the thing out. There's foam all over it. It seems to be wrapped in plastic. Yeah, that's pretty good. Right, this shot out when I pulled the box apart. So This is the 00 Great Western AEC diesel railcar. So you've got all sorts of information here in the first few paragraphs about the model. It does say that it's got a centrally mounted motor which drives all wheels on the model using drive shafts. Hopefully those will be out of sight. It also says that the model does require some bedding in, so it needs running in basically, which I will do. It also says that the gears, the bearings and the axles must be kept clean and lubricated, so I'll be very interested to see how easy Heljan have made it for you to do that on this model, because historically Heljan's models are very, very difficult to access and they're not at all intuitive to service. Then what have we got? This is the class history, I believe, so if you want to pause and read that, absolutely feel free to. There's quite a lot of info there, which is really good. Then you've got a little bit more. There's an exploded, well, sort of an exploded diagram there with a list of parts by the looks of it. As far as I can tell, the mechanism does appear to be pretty well hidden. I can't actually see the motor or the drive shafts here on the diagram. So assuming the model itself looks the same, that will be a huge improvement over the Dapol version. And then on the back, there's even more info on it. In fact, this does reveal where the mechanism is. You can see the motor seems to be housed on the underframe. The motor's got 2 flywheels, and yeah, the drive shafts do seem to be way down out of sight. There's a switchboard there, presumably for some of the lights, and there's a key there to show you what all of the different switches do. And there's a bit about the light functions as well, which isn't that relevant to me because I don't have DCC on this one. Okay. Right, well there's an accessories bag on the end here, so let's take a look what's in it. Let's see, probably not a great deal. No, it doesn't look like it is a great deal actually. It's literally just a pair of couplings, but that's all right. And I suppose it's questionable whether you actually need couplings on this thing, because generally speaking, they just kind of ran on their own, didn't they? Although maybe, I don't know, maybe it wouldn't be unusual for them to couple to the odd something once in a while. But I don't tend to do that when I run them. Right, any other accessories hiding anywhere? No, I don't think so. So everything's fitted to the model by the looks of things. And speaking of the model, let's pull it out and take a look. Now usually I'm quite critical of Heljan for fitting all of the details and stuff to the buffer beams as standard. But if they've done that on this model, it doesn't really matter because most people aren't going to be coupling anything to it. So in this case, I think that will be fine. Let's pull this back. Wow. Now that is unusual. I didn't realise it had such a dark coloured roof. It's a bit oily, I have to say. I might have to give that a bit of a wipe. But yeah, it's quite a dark colour, and it's also a really nice finish. Can you see that? If I angle it, yeah, it does shine a little bit too, which is really nice. Okay, so this thing looks great. It actually really does look great. Let's pull it up. Let's see if it's heavy. Alright, so actually to say that it's not going to be hauling massive trains like most diesel locos are, the weight doesn't seem too bad. It's not dreadfully heavy or anything, but it seems about right for what it is. The underframe, the underside is just covered in oil. You can see both of the bogies are just swimming in oil. Hopefully that won't translate over to the bodywork and the detailing as well. Yeah, fingers crossed that's not the case. But yeah, all looks to be in order. I can see that the drive shafts are exposed, but I suppose it's much better than having them visible on the inside of the model. All right, so yeah, it's a handsome looking model actually, isn't it? And so far it does look to be more detailed than Dapol's railcar, which is good to see. But we will take a closer look at the detailing in just a second. First up though, let's have a little bit of history on the class in real life. The railcars of the Great Western Railway were first introduced way back in 1933, and they did become very successful and also popular among passengers with that very attractive air-smoothed bodywork design. They earned themselves the nickname Flying Banana because, like I say, the first few examples had rounded lines which made them look like bananas. The class was also fairly luxurious as well, with onboard heating, which was interestingly steam-powered, so they had to have all the equipment on board for that. A few were even fitted with buffet bars and tables, which is fascinating as well, so yeah, serious luxury with some of these. And then later examples, such as this one built at Swindon, they did away with the streamlined bodies and they were constructed with these angular ends instead, as can be seen on this model. 38 cars were built in total by AEC between 1933 and 1942, although only 3 cars remain in preservation, the remainder of course having been very sadly scrapped. So there she is, up close and personal for you, Heljan's brand new for 2021 AEC Railcar. Now, I do understand £160 is an awful lot of money to pay for something like this, but for once it's not so bad because there's nothing wrong with this model. I'm pleasantly surprised. You might not believe it, but seriously, there is nothing wrong with this model. It's super detailed as far as I can tell. The decoration is very accurate and precise. The build quality is very good. The separately fitted parts are done cleanly without any glue and they're all nice and straight. The finish looks beautiful. Yeah, overall, this really does look like a cracking model, and yes, it appears to be considerably better than Dapple's railcar in basically every area, except the weight. This is quite a lot lighter than Dapple's Great Western railcar by some 60 grams or so, but like I said earlier on, that's not too critical with this because you're not likely to be coupling much, if anything, to this railcar, and so for the most part, it's just got to propel itself, which of course its weight of 337 grams is more than adequate for. And in fact, I really wouldn't recommend trying to couple anything to this because, as usual, Heljan have fitted the full buffer beam detail to this, which completely covers up the NEM pockets anyway, so in order to actually fit a NEM into there, you'd have to remove some of that. So I wouldn't recommend doing it, but for once, it's actually very convenient that all of this has been factory fitted, and just look at the level of detail as well. You've got proper screw-link couplings. That's not always the case on models, although Heljan do tend to include it. And then you've got vacuum pipes, maybe what looks like a steam heat pipe as well. Loads of detail on those. Heljan always fit this detail to their locos indiscriminately, and usually it's very inconvenient, but in this case it isn't. Right, let's take a look at the decoration then, which is actually very, very impressive. This is done to a very high standard. Let's start by looking at the areas where different colours meet. Let's look at the roof. First of all, the finish is fantastic on the roof, let me just say that. Then you've got the white cab roofs meeting the black of the main roof. Perfectly straight line, no paint bleed whatsoever, and the same is true everywhere else on the model. The join between the blood and custard, absolutely perfect. The lining is very, very crisp and sharp, even on these tiny areas around the windows, as you can see. Yeah, the decoration is top notch. It's not dreadfully complex on this model as per the prototype, but what is there is excellent. You've got the running number there, which is nice and cleanly applied. That's good to see. And then even on the ends where the angular bodywork starts to take shape, all of the lining and the different colours remain precise, which is fantastic. So very, very good decoration, and of course the finish as well on the bodywork is gorgeous. Not at all a cheap looking plastic finish as you see on some models. So that is fantastic, really good. The level of detail is also excellent. There are a ton of separately fitted parts on this model, including real etched grills on the underframe there, and there is a little bit of detail behind those, which gives you a real sense of depth on this model. That's really, really cool. I like that a lot. And there are separately fitted handrails around the doors. As you can see, those are metal, and therefore again you've got a sense of depth on those. They're not just moulded and then painted, so they look great. The door handles themselves, I believe, are just a part of the moulding, and that is true on both doors, as you can see, but they are still precisely decorated, so they still look the part, and that is true of other surface details which are designed to look like separate parts. Around the ends, the wipers on the cabs do appear to be separately fitted as well, and those are separately painted. That's so much better than just moulded wipers on the windscreens, and of course at this sort of price you would expect nothing less. The lights look really good as well. The moulding is nice and clean around the lights, and they've even picked out the metal frames around the lights that would be there in real life. That is fantastic. It really does look great. Can't wait to see those working. You've got separately fitted handrails around the cabs. You've got the separately fitted lamp brackets as well. And as the box described, you do have sprung buffers, although these buffers are just plastic, which is a bit strange. So they do have a bit of a plasticky finish, unfortunately, but overall it's not a huge complaint. The bogie detail looks to be quite complex as well. It's actually different depending on which side of the bogie you look at. So lots of detail down there, which is great. The glazing is pretty good as well. As you can see, if we look at it from this angle, you can see it's nice and flush to the bodywork, which is quite a nice effect. And then the windows towards the back, where the sort of brake guard section would be, if it were a coach, I guess, they have a sort of bar effect going on. And in fact, the interior behind that section is compromised very slightly by the circuit boards and presumably the DCC socket. But that's the right place for it. At least it's not in the main passenger compartment where those parts would be very noticeable. So there is a fair bit of interior detail. You've got the seats inside there. The floor level seems to be pretty good actually. It's not noticeably high, and just looking at the model normally you can't really see the floor, so the exact level of the flooring doesn't matter too much. Much better than on the Dapol models, of course, where the floor level was noticeably high where the mechanism was. The cabs do have some detail inside. There's not very much in the way of painted detail, unfortunately, but you can see there is a brake wheel there and also a few other little bits and bobs. So yeah, just a passing glance at the cabs gives you the right illusion, I would say. It looks really, really good. So yeah, it's a beautiful loco actually. The bodywork is great, the finish is lovely. It's perhaps not the most complex model in the world, which does make the price a little bit questionable maybe, but at least you get what you pay for in terms of quality. The presentation, the accuracy of the assembly, it's all bang on. So yeah, it's a little bit expensive, but I'm pleased to say you do get what you pay for. At least visually. I'm a little bit nervous about the mechanism. It did say on the instructions how important it was to access the gears and the bearings and everything to keep them clean, so I am very curious to see how easy that is to do. So I'm going to investigate that. I'll take the body off, we'll show you around inside, then of course more importantly we'll give it its first test and see what the performance is actually like. Alright, this should be very interesting. Let's give it a try. So there is the railcar down onto the track, ready for its first ever test. I would say I think the mechanism is going to do the job actually. I would say it seems to me like it's a very cheaply produced mechanism, and obviously given how expensive this model was, there is a bit of a mismatch there, isn't there? It's a pity there wasn't a higher quality mechanism, but that is what it is. There's also a classic Heljan hilarious design bodge inside this loco, which is always funny, isn't it? So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. First of all though, first job was obviously to clean the model because it was covered in nasty lubricant, and obviously you don't want that on your trains when you run them because it attracts dirt and stuff, so I got rid of that. I decided I would have a quick look at the motor, so to do that I removed the base of the model, as you can see, and there is the motor. This is quite a typical Heljan motor. I've seen something like this at least on quite a lot of Heljan locos. I'm not sure whether it's a 3 or a 5-pole motor. Something tells me it might be a 3-pole. I'm not sure though, so if the performance is good, I won't mark it down or anything. There was a noticeable issue with this straight away though, and that is that one of the motor wires was visibly pushing on one of the flywheels, which is obviously going to produce friction. So I did give Heljan the benefit of the doubt there and just move that out of the way, but yeah, that doesn't inspire too much confidence on the actual assembly of this thing. Right, so obviously serviceability and access is important with any loco, so let's see how easy it is to access the bogie. Not very easy. There are 6 clips, I believe, holding each bogie base on, 2 at the ends and then 4 across the length of the things. So yes, you do need at least 4 hands to do this. I did manage to get the base off in the end though, to reveal that there is just a plastic bogie chassis which is in 2 parts, not properly held together. That's very, very cheap. I do prefer the die-cast bogie chassis personally. No proper bearings on the wheel set. Not a huge deal because of course it is just a plastic chassis, but it would have been nice to have seen proper metal bearings. You can also tell that it's very over lubricated as well, far too much gloop all over this mechanism, but I'm not going to try and clean it off in case the thing doesn't work properly and then people try to blame me for it, so I'm not going to do that. And as you can see, there are just wiper pickups on each of the wheels, which is fine. That is definitely the way I would do it. Okay, here's the hilarious part. Are you ready? Body removal. So it looks like I'm unscrewing the body. That's reasonable to assume. The instructions said that 4 screws needed to be removed, and that's what I'm doing right now. But these screws do absolutely nothing. They are utterly useless. Why? What do they screw into, I hear you ask? Well, they screw into these little threads on the body, which, here's the funny part, are not attached to the body in any way. They're just friction fitted into these little channels. One of those threads was still stuck to the chassis when I pulled the body out. Another one of them just came off entirely and I was able to just pick it up and put it back in place. The body screws are literally just there for show. So you might have said, oh, well done, Heljan, you've used screws to actually hold the body on. No, they haven't. They're just there for show. They do nothing. Maybe they guide the body into position, maybe, but they certainly do nothing to hold it on. But you might think that's okay. The instructions did mention some clips as well, which also hold the body on. Well, sorry, no. There are no clips on the inside of the body. As you can see, there's nothing there at all. There are these little sections at the rear end of the unit, and you might think those are the clips, But no, at that point on the chassis, it's just a recess, so there's nothing holding the body on. Now, it doesn't matter too much because the body is quite a tight fit to the chassis, so it does kind of stay in place, but do bear in mind it is only friction holding this body on. So it's good to know that the same old bright spark at Heljan is still doing a good job with the designs. Anyway, enough of the messing around. Here is the chassis. It's quite a nicely designed chassis, I will say that. All of the circuitry, the decoder socket and everything like that, the wiring, it's all contained in that rear section where the interior isn't too visible, so that's okay. You've got a light bar here, which suggests, well, which pretty strongly suggests that we've got interior lighting. Quite sparse on the old LEDs, but hopefully it will do a good job of evenly lighting it. You've got the front lights here, which correspond to the front lights on the body. You've got a cab light as well, which faces down into the cab. And then you've got another light, which faces upwards from the top of the light bar. I'm guessing there's going to be a light channel, which will allow that to power the front and back lights on the top of the body. I suppose the only thing left is the gauging. Quite a bit of margin for error on the gauging, 14.4, 14.5 and 14.6 I measured on the back-to-backs. So they're a little bit inconsistent, but none of them are so far off that they're going to cause major problems. So yeah, it's the typical Heljan mechanism, not very serviceable, not that high quality, and of course there is a hilarious little bodge thrown in there as well, which did amuse me greatly during the disassembly, so thank you Heljan for that. Okay, let's give this thing a test then. It has not been running yet, so it might not necessarily be at its best at the moment, but let's find out whether it at least works. Hopefully it does. So 50% speed, let's see. Yes, it does work, okay. And it seems to work quite nicely as well. I can see that the lights are working. Let's take a look here. So yeah, in forwards you've got 3 warm white lights which face you, 2 at the bottom, 1 at the top. And then in reverse you've got the 1 brake light which faces you as well. The interior lighting, I honestly cannot see any interior lighting at all. So it's either not working or incredibly dim. It's also a little bit wobbly. Yeah, I can see the whole thing wobbling left to right as it runs along. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get that on camera or not, but yeah, it's not, it's smooth, but it is sort of oscillating left and right as it runs. Again, proper bearings and a more sturdy bogie chassis would probably have eliminated that. Right, I'm interested now to know whether the interior lighting is actually working. So let's dim the lights. I'm just going to hold the loco in place for a second, and we'll ramp it up to full power and see whether we can actually see some lights. And yes, we can. Okay. Barely, but you can see them there. So they're not very bright, to be honest with you. On analog, you're not going to notice them at all unless you're in a dark room, because this is a sort of reasonable speed and it's very dim at that point. On DCC you might have a bit more joy because obviously they will be lighting at full brightness for you with the function enabled, but yeah, ultimately they could do with being slightly brighter or slightly more numerous. Like I say, the LEDs on the interior light bar were quite sparse and so they're not producing a great amount of light. So yeah, that's a pity, but at least they are working. I was afraid for a second that they weren't. Right, let me get the lights back on. Okay, so what is the crawl like? Let's find out. So this is straight out of the box, so it will need running in before it does the best crawl, but there it goes. It's cogging quite a bit there, which is strange because it does have flywheels, which maybe suggests that this is just a 3-pole motor, maybe. But that's pretty slow and controlled, and it's not cutting out, which is good news. So cogging aside, I would say that's a pretty good performer right there. Again, to say it's not been run in. Yeah. It seems to do the job, doesn't it? It's reasonably quiet. It's a pity about the wobbling though. That doesn't look too good. But yeah, seems to be working okay. So let's run this in for 30 minutes in each direction, and also let's see how it handles the layout. Okay. So here it goes around the curves, fingers crossed nothing's going to go wrong. Oh, look at it, it's definitely wobbling, isn't it? But it doesn't seem to be, I don't think, affecting the performance, other than the fact that if it was real and it was wobbling like that, it would be less of a locomotive and more of an earthquake simulator. So it's a little bit distracting, I would say, to look at. this model is too expensive to be wobbling along like that. Maybe they're not all like that, maybe that's just a quality issue with mine. But if it wasn't for that, I would say the performance was pretty good, actually, because it's handling the curves all right. Seems to be running at a fairly constant speed. It doesn't appear to be struggling under huge friction or anything. The actual speed seems quite sensible as well. Was it the Dapol Great Western one that went a bit quick? It might have been. Well, this one definitely isn't too quick. This is a very sensible speeder here at 50. So yeah, it's looking okay. I'm going to run it in. Maybe the wobbling will go away. Maybe it will be even better after running in has concluded. I don't know. But I'll see you in just a second. Don't go anywhere. Okay folks, there we go. Running in has concluded with no issues, no derailing, no slowing down. The speed seems nice and constant. It is still wobbling though, which is a pity. That doesn't seem to have gone away. I don't suppose you'll be able to notice it at this angle, but I can see it from where I'm sitting. Yeah, just left and right wobbling as it runs along. Yeah, it's not the greatest thing really. And I did fit a coupling to this so that I could test its pulling power. Let me reiterate, I do not recommend trying to couple anything to this because honestly, it will ruin your day. The couplings are literally a travesty. Everything about them is a complete cock-up from start to finish. The counterweight on the coupling hook itself is precisely the wrong height so that it can pass over the coupling bar but then get stuck on it on the way back down, so they can get stuck in the upper position. They fit into the world's flimsiest NEM pockets you've ever seen, and they literally buckle under the act of having couplings pushed into them. And then once it is in place, the coupling sits far too low to actually have anything coupled to it, except for another Heljan product perhaps, which has an equally poor coupling. Not that it matters anyway, because as soon as you go around the curve, it will derail whatever it's hauling because of all the buffer beam detail in the way. And I don't really get what the trouble is with Heljan and couplings, because I've seen this from them time and time again, and I had to design some NEM couplings so that I could optimize a set for my 3D printer, and they've worked faultlessly from the start, and that's with me having about a month's model making experience. There's nothing too difficult about couplings. I can't understand how Heljan just can't get them right. It's bizarre. So Heljan are incredibly lucky that this locomotive does not need to couple to anything in order to run realistically. If this was a regular diesel loco that actually was supposed to be coupled to a train or something, then this would be completely unfit for purpose, and that would have to be reflected in the score. Fortunately, that is not the case, but yeah, seriously, just save yourself a huge headache and don't try and couple anything to it. I did though, and the pulling power was very good, 0.45 newtons, that's equivalent to around 27 coaches, which is slightly insane, so that does mean that the slightly lightweight of the loco doesn't matter at all. It's perfectly fine. So let's see what the slow speed is like now that the thing is fully run in. As you can see, pretty good. It's cogging a little bit, but that is very good and slow, which is great. A bit faster, the LEDs come on at around that point, but of course they wouldn't on DCC, they'd be on all the time. And yeah, it's reasonably smooth, isn't it? It's not 100% constant at this speed, but at the higher speeds, at 50 for example, it's perfectly good. And at 50 it looks quite reasonable in its speed as well. Not too fast, not too slow, and it tends to maintain its speed as well, which is good. So yeah, can't really fault it too much. So let's have a run with it and I'll run some other rail cars for you. So today's theme is going to be single car DMUs, or just rail cars, that sort of thing, stuff that's designed to run on its own. So on the middle line I've got the Dapol Great Western Railcar, which is much less detailed and it looks much less good than the Heljan one does. However, the mechanism in here is much better, much higher quality mechanism, and the performance is actually quite a bit better on the Dapol. So there is no definitive winner really. Heljan looks much better, much more detail, but the mechanism is far poorer. This one looks far poorer, it's got far fewer details, but it runs so much better. So yeah, it's a strange state of affairs. And then on the inside line I've got the Lima one. This is actually the same design as the Heljan in that it's got the sort of angular ends, but yeah, it's definitely nowhere near as detailed obviously. So see which other single car units you can spot on the track. Everything is designed to run on its own except for one thing in the sidings. So see if you can spot the odd one out and comment it down below. So when all is said and done, except for the wobbling, which may or may not be typical of all of these, I've no way of knowing that, it is perfectly good as it runs along. Lovely, nice, smooth performance, nice and quiet. overall, not too much to fault about this. It is quite a dear model, I would say. It's quite expensive for what it is, but overall you do get what you pay for in the level of detail and the running qualities. So overall, while it definitely could have been a little bit better, I can probably recommend this, and overall I would say it's probably the better choice if you want a Great Western Railcar than the Dapol one. But then again, if you really want the streamlining, maybe Dapol's is the way to go, because of course it is cheaper and it does have that better mechanism. So it swings and roundabouts. Maybe I should post a poll on my community tab, yeah, I think I will do that, to ask which one you prefer. And I suppose the broader question it will be asking is whether you prefer looks or whether you prefer a good mechanism. Or I suppose price comes into it as well. You know what, let's not overthink this. Just head over to my community tab and vote on which one you would rather buy. And I will, of course, read the results in the next Model Railway News video. Let's have some ratings then for the Heljan Great Western Railcar. The level of detail was very, very impressive on this, much more so than I expected. Top-notch decoration, very, very good accurate decoration. Great detailing, I loved the etched metal grills, the separately fitted parts, the separate windscreen wipers. Yeah, really good level of detail. Doesn't quite get 5-star because the interior isn't super detailed, there was no painting in the cabs and such, but overall the level of detail really, really good. The performance gets a generous, and yes I do think this is generous, 4-star from me. It gets that because it is a good smooth runner, the speed is very competent and it's also very constant. The crawl is okay, it's not the best crawl in the world, but it's fine for what this is. It does wobble though as it runs along, and that wobbling hasn't really gone away with running in, so a slightly better quality mechanism would definitely have done this a bit of a favour there. The pulling power though is perfectly acceptable, 0.45 newtons, that's way more than this needs actually as a rail car that would usually run on its own. Not that you can really couple anything to it though, of course, but the pulling power is absolutely fine. The mechanism then gets 3 stars. Now I've not knocked anything off it for the travesty of a coupling design. I would have done if this was a loco designed to actually haul stuff, but because this isn't really, I think it would be unfair to knock stuff off. Again, perhaps that is a generous outlook to have, but I am going to just give it 3-star on the mechanism because it does have all-wheel pickup, which is great, all-wheel drive, that's pretty good. The motor seems alright in this one, not the greatest in the world, it does cog a little bit, but seems to do the job. However, the plastic construction of the mechanism, the lack of proper bearings and the lack of serviceability does make this one of the less good mechanisms out there on the market at the moment, but it's not too bad, it does the job. The quality gets 4-star. Overall, I was pretty impressed with the quality. It is largely plastic in its construction, although the motor housing base is metal and that is quite weighty. But overall, yeah, the build quality is fantastic. No glue marks in sight. Everything fitted to the model is nice and precise. I can't give it 5-star because the quality of the mechanism still leaves a bit to be desired, but overall, not a huge issue on the quality. Value for money then, I've given 3-star. 189.99 is quite a lot of money. Hatton's price 160.65. That's a little bit better, but still very expensive. The fact is this model isn't dreadfully complex, and it does have a very cheap mechanism, which really isn't befitting of a model that costs this much, but it's certainly not terrible value for money, that's for sure. So overall then, that is a fairly good score of 7.79 out of 10. That's the best part of 8 out of 10, and into the logbook it goes. There it is, 14th place above the Webb coal tank and below the Hornby class M7. Yeah, overall I could recommend one of these. Good models, they look the part, and they do seem to work pretty well too. Well folks, that is just about it for this review. Overall, pleasantly surprised. Yeah, it's quite a good loco overall, this one. Do let me know, of course, down in the comments what you think about this. If you've got one, do let me know what your experiences are. Have you tried to couple anything to it? Did it ruin your day? Did you jump off the top of a car park? Did you not want to live anymore? Do let me know. But that is all I have to say. So thank you very much for watching. I will see you very, very soon for some more videos. You take care, have a great week, and I'll see you soon. Alright, cheers everybody.